Do you know any business with a reasonable shareholder that fires CEO when he haven't found the new one?
Yeah, it's only here.
It's only here, yeah.
Only
it's
here.
all political things.
Yeah.
Like even the CEO for airBaltic, I think it's a political thing. It's not.
I'm very sure.
It has nothing to do with your job results, I think.
No, I think so too. But I'm in the process of finding out because there's of course a lot of things which happened in the back. But I'm trying to find out what was it? What element of politics? Because
I think it's mainly related to like our Prime Minister Vienotība, if you know the
but they were
party, because they are super unpopular, super unpopular.
Yes, but then do they become more popular in the?
Yeah, they show that they can do something, even if it's not right. Do you have your own plane?
No,
Not yet.
No. And I would not want to have my own plane to fly it myself. If you have your own plane, then you should be sitting in the back, right? Let's say if you're in the US and you have a certain business, then you use the private jet to go from A to B because it's more convenient.
Yeah.
In Europe, we are not the same because people here don't use it as it is not liked. But in the US, if you have a certain revenue in your company, it is making more sense because the FBOs, when you go to different places, it's all set up that you arrive by plane and then you do your business. And we in Europe, we are not like this. Here you need to be at a very large corporation or very wealthy, then it's accepted.
Or you can be Prime Minister and go with the private jet all the time.
But that is also something where I say it's locally, I think. Tell me one Prime Minister in Europe which would have to go through this. Yeah, it's only here.
It's only here, yeah.
Only
it's
here.
all political things.
Yeah.
Like even the CEO for airBaltic, I think it's a political thing. It's not.
I'm very sure.
It has nothing to do with your job results, I think.
No, I think so too. But I'm in the process of finding out because there's of course a lot of things which happened in the back. But I'm trying to find out what was it? What element of politics? Because
I think it's mainly related to like our Prime Minister Vienotība, if you know the
but they were
party, because they are super unpopular, super unpopular.
Yes, but then do they become more popular in the?
Yeah, they show that they can do something, even if it's not right.
But would you say in half a year from now that they are more popular? I mean, maybe this election now helps because this rich.
But this is how they think, like. In 2 weeks, 1 week period, something like that.
So technically, the only people who said that I'm to be gone is the state secretary of the transport ministry.
Yes.
Nothing from prime minister.
No, of course they would not show it.
Yeah, but then I would say let's see what comes out later. There must be something because Vienotība is supportive of airBaltic, right? So they understand more about the business, they understand what is needed. Why would they do this? Because they delay now the IPO?
No, basically I think they understand that IPO currently with current markets is not really possible.
But you need to still
let's be kind of realistic.
No, you need to do it. No, you could have done it. Not this week, I agree. This week was not, but you can do the IPO, especially when you say you want to have a backed up IPO as this was planned. So is this recorded already?
a bit.
Yeah, let's say you do an IPO where the majority shareholder says we go in big, and then the rest of the market comes, you are oversubscribed, and then maybe the majority shareholder says, okay, we reduce again, similar to the bond.
No,
such an IPO is technically possible because I think there was sufficient interest. Not this week, I agree.
Yeah.
But I would say that the state, if they want to do the IPO and support it, they can do it. If they want to do a different solution, like an M&A transaction, then I agree. But for the IPO, you want to have a stable management. That's what everybody tells you. And that's what I don't get. Why to do this now when my contract was ending anyway, end of next year? There's something which I don't understand. And the way how it was done was more damaging for the company than for me.
That's definitely, yeah, that's definitely. Do you know any business with a reasonable shareholder that fires CEO when he haven't found the new one?
No,
Even that.
No, that's why I said maybe there was something happening which they did not really understand. And now I say in the transport ministry, the shareholder, because this was done on a table in my office, maybe. That's why I said I can also return and we can fix this, yeah, because there's a couple of things which don't make sense. The investors were happy with me. Abroad, the other countries, the bankers, the lawyers, the advisors, and I was doing the advertising for it and I was painting that vision. So if you want to do an IPO, why are you not doing it with the team which did it? Now you select a new CEO, but that new CEO will also have to say what he sees as a vision, and this will take a while. It's not just plugging in even the best in the world. He will have to tell the vision. And that's what I said yesterday. I gave an interview which is not published. I said, I have no special pride. I can just return. If they find,
yeah,
they find a reason,
they need to admit that it was a mistake.
No, but it was a mistake maybe done in the administration of the lower level transport ministry, because I haven't heard the prime minister making a statement about it, right? So if it would have been at the very high level, then you would have them saying something.
But
all I had was a lawyer.
They are always hiding and not showing themselves. So it's not that if somebody else said it, they are nothing to do with it. So it's not like this works in Latvia, I would say.
Yeah, but you can imagine that
they're always hiding behind somebody's back.
14 years I have been here. 6 different governments, 7 different transport ministers, 5 supervisory boards. I think I understand how some of the stuff works, even if I don't speak the language. I was always focusing on airBaltic, and I do this now, because whatever I can do that this company doesn't take more damage, I do. So my solution today would be to say, okay, this is not unseen in the world that the leader goes and comes back, right? You just need to explain that. And then the question is, are you strong enough to, because there will be a couple of haters who say that's not good, but are you strong enough, but you execute, yeah, and say, okay, this is for the IPO, to execute the IPO. You would check now what the financial world says before you do that. You would say, what do the minority shareholders say, like Lufthansa? You ask them, and if they say, I think this is the better move, then you say, okay, we had loss of confidence as a majority shareholder, but, and that was the shareholder, Ministry of Transport. But overall, Latvia would like to do this. So this is how I would do it. But I don't want to come across of saying, I need to come back. I still have, after 14 years, this company and the 3,000 people and what has been built in my head. Really, I'm an entrepreneur without shares. But I came because my life before was I was also building a company. I was a shareholder selling it, and I became successful. I came here, and I always wanted to be a shareholder. And since 2018, we were talking about doing an IPO. Then came COVID, then came Ukraine war, then came Pratt & Whitney issues, and then recession in the Baltics. Like a couple of things in a row, which were unfortunate. But there will be an end to all of this, and the story of airBaltic is liked. There was my LinkedIn post, which wasn't intended to get such a... it has now 4,000 likes for a normal person, but it has 300 comments. And each of the comments, if you read them, and they're from leaders in the world, there's not a single comment which doesn't say great job done. So then the question is, if everybody thinks it was a great job done, can the ones who maybe did an admin mistake, because the whole situation, how it was done, was really pretty funny, it wasn't prepared, to say, okay, that wasn't the smartest move, let's turn it back. That's what I said, because I have to say something. They want to drag me into statements about a court battle and all of this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to damage the company in any form, because they haven't told me yet what happens to my contract. Because what they did, they recalled me from the chairman of the board, but there's a contract in place, which they haven't said how they see the contract. Yeah, and people want to get out of me, what's the compensation, what's the details. I don't do this. I haven't done it in 14 years. I kept also all the stuff with the government. I keep this because this is part of my job. And if you're in between business and politics, you need to understand what helps the company the most, right? And I came when the previous CEO was in a battle over years, and the company deserves better. So I'm not the one who will do that, because there's now 3,000 people, millions of passengers, and there's partners like Lufthansa, which are very valuable players in this industry, and you don't want to ruin these relations or do something which you can't return. We had 5 airlines in the neighborhood in my time which went bankrupt, and this one is here today. It came at a price, but yeah, not the haters on Twitter to judge. I think the people who understand to judge. And then politics, needs to also understand what they want to do long term.
I think it's if I need to phrase it in one sentence, I think it's a case of strong management and a weak shareholder.
Shareholder, I agree, which is the Ministry of Transport. This is a mess. But if you look at the shareholder Prime Minister, if I look back at the bond, when we had issues with the bond to do it, and the engagement of the Prime Minister to make it successful at the end was impressive. There was leadership, and therefore I'm thankful for that leadership at the time. I think the same is needed now. And the Ministry of Transport, especially at the admin area, has proven in the past that they were not doing the best stuff, right? Mm. So if you isolate it, then
we will stay all the interview here. Let's go to we will talk all the interesting stuff here. So let's go.
I googled when I saw you first time, and you know that we have a photo in Singapore.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't know who the other person was. He was your partner at the time. Right?
Yeah, he's currently in USA, working in some big fund, managing a lot of money. So that's the only guy I know who studied at MIT in US. So he's a really smart guy. That was like a long time ago, no?
Yeah, and my kids, the 2 younger ones, they said to me when I came home, they said, we don't know any other job you did, and they're adults, right? Yeah. They said, for us, the only job you always did was airBaltic. Yeah. It's also for me, this became like my life. Yeah. That was why it was so nasty how they did it. This was not okay, because there was no need to do this, right? I didn't steal anything. I think this was to show strength, power, which I think is not, at least internationally, not something you can shine with. That's why I say I always evaluate what is in the current situation a move you do. And at the moment, I would say the smartest move would to say, okay, we want to continue doing the IPO. It's happening not now because markets are crazy. What's our next window? And what are the things we need? And what you need is the story. You need numbers. Numbers will be okay because the markets now help. And then you also need a management team where investors say, okay, if I buy the shares, these guys will grow the company. And if they find another CEO who convinces the shareholders to put money in, okay. But if not, then you end up in an M&A transaction where the state needs to find another buyer, or, as some people already say, you split the company. You take the profitable part and give it to somebody, and you keep the unprofitable part forever. What a good solution, right? That means other airlines coming, thank you, to Latvia. Okay.
I heard that there was some kind of plan to when IPO would be in place, just not if you buy the shares, it's not only the shares, but also you get something like a flights for the money or something like that.
No, we had a marketing campaign which is addressing the public, and the public would really benefit. That's why the banks, the amounts of money raised from that, plus the state, would basically do the IPO already, but then you have the investors on top.
But what was the plan? If you buy, for example, shares for, I don't know, 1,000 euros, would it be also kind of you can use the 1,000 for flights or no?
No, it was a combination of free, depending on how much shares you sign up for. So you become an investor as a frequent flyer, and other benefits, which I still keep all the confidentiality because the program is not out. But when the microphones are off, I'll tell you.
Okay, I got it. But I think in general, if you can if you buy shares for, I don't know, 1,000 or whatever, 2,000, if you forgive for the same amount, like a voucher, you can use when the flights are empty and you can fly, I think, like, yes, that would work like brilliantly.
I know. I created it.
Oh, okay. So I heard the idea. I thought, oh, that's really smart.
That's why I said, guys, why you're doing this now when we have the chance to do an IPO, especially if the state says we're gonna come in and say, if they would have said, okay, we come in, like in the bond, then you bring the rest, whatever the rest is, and then the state gets diluted to whatever they wanted.
Yeah, and then if the markets are good, that you always can dilute, right?
Yes. And so there were so many advisors, or there are advisors in the background who modeled this. So let's see. I still hope that this happens. It's not happening now, but maybe. I know the windows, depending on what happens. But they're searching a CEO now. According to the media, there's already the first candidates. They bring the person fast, and the person then convinces the investor that of whatever, what does it help if the person comes and says what Gauss did was the right thing? So he maybe needs
what to do then?
So he needs to bring a new strategy, and a new strategy means that the other board members need to say we were running for the wrong strategy.
But what would be the other strategy to rent out all the planes?
To just give all the planes to Lufthansa.
Yeah.
That's a good strategy for the Latvian economy. Or the connectivity of Latvia.
Yeah, for the connectivity.
No, you need to. I think that was already said. The neighboring states need to do their fair share.
I think Estonia already today told that, we support the idea, but
no money.
not with money. So.
And I somehow agree that you can do this, but you can do this like Munich and Frankfurt for Lufthansa, right? These are two major hubs, and Lufthansa is also benefiting, depending on how many aircraft are at what hub, from the different bases. So you could do a lot of things in this industry where you don't have to put cash in. Like Latvia is supporting airBaltic by having us in Riga and having a hub and all of that. But there's not so many scheduled airlines in Latvia which you could compare to. There's no scheduled airlines in the whole of the Baltics now. So this is when the podcast starts.
Yeah. No, it's already, we discussed all the important things. Now we can focus on...
wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it up. So
Yes.
what we understood today, shareholder is made a big mistake, and basically if they apologize, you would consider...
Not even apologize, because I don't need apology.
No, I'm kidding. If they would understand that it was a mistake.
Not even, I don't think it's a mistake. If you look now at what is the situation and what is the best way forward for airBaltic.
Yeah.
We're talking about a 3,000 employee company, which is an infrastructure airline in the world, respected, a brand. You say you want to go to the stock exchange, and there is a very good chance to do that. Why are you not doing this? And if the person who was running it is such an evil, the contract of that person ends in the end of 2026. And you then say, we say today we will not extend that contract. But I finished the job I came for. That's it. I said I will deliver the IPO. Normally after an IPO, shareholders are interested in keeping the management, but that's a shareholder decision after the IPO. And if we look at it 1.5 years from now, I would have finished the job. And that's where I say, if the people come together and talk rational, that is the fastest way to a solution where the Latvian state has an airline which is, as it is growing, because there's 50 aircraft coming which need to be prepaid. And if you delay this too long, the prepayments of these aircraft need to be pushed out, the growth needs to be pushed out, and the strategy will not be executed the way it was planned. And it's not a strategy which I did. This strategy was planned, it was taken through the board, through the supervisory boards, especially the previous one, which understood how business works. So I would say, and I don't want to come across that I want to do this job, right? You can also just accept the current situation, go home, wait what comes next. But I think I put a lot of effort in beyond what I got paid for to build this global brand. It's a global brand today. And Lufthansa came. I think I had an influential role on that with my background. And the financial markets liked the story. So the numbers, the debt of the company is not okay and was never okay. But the story was liked, and in the view of the banks and the advisors, an IPO is technically possible. Not this week.
Okay, but let's talk a bit. Mēs jau tur kaut kas rakstās, ja kāds? Okay, also. Let's talk maybe a bit from monetary perspective. What does it mean for a country if they would be the biggest buyer in an IPO case? What it means monetarily? So actually, if they are already shareholder and they would buy, so basically the net, it would be zero for them. They are not kind of adding money, or they are.
Let's talk money. If we say the state would, let's say the valuation of the company would be zero.
Or 100 million.
Let's start at zero. It's easy. You bring 300 million in from the outside, then the existing shareholder would be at zero value. So they would have no shares. The state said they want to make 25%, they want to keep. In such an example, the state would need to bring 75 million, then they would have 25%. If the state now says we bring 150 million, they would already own 50% of the company. If after the IPO they would really be allocated 150 million, which probably they would not. So the idea was to make an IPO between 200 and 300 million, final figures to come at the end. The state supporting the IPO, basically bagging it up in the beginning by saying we would be willing to bring 150 million. Now all other investors come, local investors, international investors, if there's an interest, retail investors, and retail investors in the Baltics are a good group. And now you're building the book, and let's say you go to 500 million before the allocation. Then the decision is, okay, how much shares the state wants to have as a minimum? Because they put in to have 50%, but you could say, okay, we allocate, depending on the valuation, because you only know, we allocate less to the state, which means the amount for the state would reduce and they would keep the shares they want. That is a decision you can only take after you start doing it. We didn't come to that point. We were very close, but we didn't come to that point. But that is still possible because that is something you do before you do an IPO. The state would, if let's say they would end up paying 150, then they would have with 300 million 50% of the share. If you do a 250 million IPO, they would have 70% of the shares, which means they're not losing the airline, but the airline is then financed and has the equity to execute the business plan. Okay,
so basically to IPO to work out, government needed to back it up with 150 million.
It wasn't a need, but it was a suggestion in the current market situation. When we started the process, there was no need for that.
I think it would be, I think that kind of explains all the situation for me, because I think that the current budget is, there is a big gap already. So they see that there's no money, and then if airBaltic asks another time for 150 million, then I think the government would just collapse. No, that's my opinion. So, and then they said, oh, let's avoid this, let's fire him, so we don't need to give this money, and whatever happens next. So that was their short-term thinking, I think.
But such discussions are not done at the Ministry of Transport State Secretary level. That should be a discussion which happens at the Prime Minister and Finance Minister level. And I think that discussion, what is coming next and the options are there. There's many options what you can do. And just it's a move which is not understandable for the advisors, for the banks, for the financial world. They don't understand why you take whatever options you have, and even if this would be the case, why you are taking out the CEO in this process for a reason which was last year's loss, which was known to them since January, right? So that was just a reason to say we lost confidence. And therefore, I do not follow the logic because it's just more difficult now, not impossible, but more difficult now.
So I think it has nothing to do with the logic. It's just party ratings, and I'm sorry that you are in the mix of it. So
I have been in many of these different ways, but I have always tried to keep the airBaltic line. Now I can't keep it because I've been taken out, but I still try to keep the line that airBaltic as a company, what it does, it ensures the connectivity. It's an economic, it has an impact to the economy. That airBaltic doesn't get damaged more than it gets damaged by this move. I still see this. While I don't have to, right? They said you are out. I could just give interviews now and say, yeah, this was not good enough. No, I do the opposite because after 14 years and creating it, I think I have for myself. I want to do this at least today because I'm fighting for airBaltic, even that they took me out because. I think everybody gets it. I was taken out for political reason. And therefore you should continue fighting. Because in politics, for example, people also, when they are taken out, are not just saying, okay, that's it. You also continue. And what I do, I fight for airBaltic.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, maybe you can comment about last year results. So the year before was good and this year again wasn't good. So please explain how much it's related to actual business, how much it's related to amortization before IPO. So because people maybe see the number and they're like, oh my God, again. So, but maybe you can explain.
Yeah, 2023 was 34 million net result. We always talk net result, and that's one of the problems because airlines are compared with EBITDA more than net result. But let's stay at net result. Last year was 34 million profit. Everybody was happy while we still were in the mega crisis. The main reason for that was that we didn't have higher compensation for engines. We had a very favorable exchange rate revaluation of the balance sheet items. There's $500 million in dollar on the balance sheet. If the dollar exchange rate in the beginning of the year is higher and then it's lower, then you have a profit and vice versa. It's per cent, per euro cent, it's 5 million. €5 million impact to airBaltic's net result, while it has no cash impact. It's
okay, but then in your favor, is the euro is stronger?
The euro now is stronger, which means, for example, the first quarter, there might be a 50 million net profit just because of the dollar exchange rate. There's nothing I have done because I'm not influencing the dollar. But no, the impact to the net result could be, if you would have the year closed now in the first quarter, you would have 10 cents times 5, it's 50 million. Last year, the 2024 result was impacted by the exchange rate going the other direction. I think that was 39 million, it's in the annual report. But then also Pratt & Whitney, we had to do a special depreciation on engine parts, which was explained in the financial call so people understand it. Because the financial world understands the result. But then there was also issues which are related to the business. And the business wasn't functioning as Estonia and Latvia were in economic recession last year. So that's a fact. But the airlines still grew on revenue, on passengers, on EBITDA. So from all these figures, the financial world says that's a growth story. To then take the net result, which is, I think 79 million was non-cash related items, is okay, I respect, but I did also in these 14 years, I think 10 years of net profit. So I cannot say that there was no net loss, but that was said to everybody involved at the beginning of the year.
But what was the result? And maybe we can go through it. Like it was something like minus
118 million was
180. So basically, okay, 120, 180. But maybe you can just divide it by. Maybe we can double click on those 180. What?
So if there's a very nice graph which our CFO explained in the financial call, which is on the website. Everybody can watch that video where he does it. But to break it down, there is an element which is not receiving the compensation from Pratt & Whitney as in the year before, so that's a big impact, while engines are still not available. There's dollar exchange rate, I think it was 39 million. And then there's 40 million depreciation of engine parts where they were in the books but didn't last that long, so they had to be depreciated faster. That's an effect of 80 million in total, but over 2 years, and the first 40 million came in. And I think then there is around 40 million to this loss, which comes from the business itself, where the revenues were not in line with what was budgeted. Yeah. So this is more or less, there's more details.
Okay.
So you can explain that, you can explain any result, but the educated financial investor understands that. And the question is, when you do an IPO, what is important? Important is that you can deliver growth on EBITDA, and you have to also show a net result. But we have, it's the growth story, the doubling of the fleet in the next 5 years is the only airline which is able to do that with that order book. Which means if you look at the revenues, in 2030 the revenues should be then around 2 billion if you just do the math. That means the EBITDA would also go up just by adding aircraft. And if the EBITDA goes up and the revenue goes up, assuming you can manage, then the question is, what does your cost base do? And therefore, with new equity, you can refinance the bond next year in May, which means you reduce your interest costs, you reduce your cost for credit card companies, your cost for suppliers. Everything goes down as you deleverage the company by higher EBITDA and having proper equity. airBaltic was unfortunately never financed from a capital side the way it should have been. And it was said by the supervisory boards all these years, it never happened. And that is the time to do it with an IPO. That was planned already in 2020, but then COVID came. So we started the journey now. I couldn't finish it yet, or the company couldn't finish it yet, but I think the solution for airBaltic, rather than going into having Riga being a Ryanair airport again, which maybe some people would like, would be for the economy, especially in the Baltics, not wise, because the Baltics are supposed to grow 3%, while the rest of Europe in the aviation sector grows by 1%. So what you would like to have is a strong airline in the Baltics. If the low-costers, who are doing a very good job, come in, you will have very strong seasonality. More passengers in summer, but a lot less in winter. And the connectivity especially from Riga, so the aviation center will move to Lithuania, that's for sure, because that country has more people and more flying will be from Lithuania. That is also a role airBaltic played. Does it have a value for the shareholder government? I thought so. I thought that there was a value. I think it's 1 billion GDP impact airBaltic has, so there is a value there. But nobody stood up and said the value of airBaltic is the GDP impact, or the value is the taxes or the employment. I was the only one saying that. I think maybe this discussion needs to start to protect airBaltic from disappearing.
Agree. Okay. So then maybe we can talk about a little bit, you mentioned the capital structure. So biggest money comes from the bonds. So bonds are like...
So the debt of airBaltic,
yeah.
And the net debt is 1.3 billion negative. And this is very simple. It's 380 million bond. And the rest is the leases going into the future, because they have to be shown as a debt. There's no other debt. So to fly the airline, you need to have the leases. And the leases are 12-year contracts. So this cost, which has to be paid, is accounted in an airline like debt. So the net debt of airBaltic is 1.3 billion, 380 million bond, okay. And the rest is leases. Okay. There's no other debt.
What's the rate of the leases, and who give the lease? It's for the purchase
airplanes.
Of the planes,
yes,
right?
Just airplanes. And we have very favorable lease contracts today, because we bought the aircraft at a good price in way back, and we are able in the market to do sale and lease back with very favorable lease rates compared to the industry. And therefore the cost factor aircraft, how airBaltic has it, gives us a competitive advantage. Also for the future. The aircraft itself is also an advantage, because it burns less fuel, less emissions, and so on. But the net debt, which people always say they have 1.3 billion debt, is a factor of the leases of the future and the bond. The bond is very high, it's 14.5%.
It's almost 60 million a year, just
yes,
the interest.
But that was deliberately done because it has a call option, and with an IPO, you have a better credit rating, and you automatically your bond. We came in 2019 with 6.75%. Then we refinanced it in the worst conditions, we had to, with 14.5%, but we refinanced it. And the bond was, before I was terminated, at 113. Now it's at around 100, so it dropped, but it also dropped because of the markets, I guess. But it's still, today the bond is still at 100, which means the financial world still believes this airline has a future. And I wouldn't risk that. I wouldn't have a public debate about airBaltic potentially being split up in two, because the bondholders will react to this and they will say, okay, then we better get out now at 100, right? Before the bond drops to whatever, 60. So I think it's very important to show to the financial world stability of airBaltic and not discuss all the time that it goes up in flames. It doesn't go up in flames. The shareholder can decide what to do with it to a certain limit, and taking the CEO out, if that is the move to rescue the company, then that's not a smart move in my view. But I'm biased because I'm the CEO. Oh, I agree.
So maybe you can also tell me where would the money would be used from IPO, the new money that comes in.
So to strengthen the balance sheet, of course, because you would reduce immediately your net debt because you have cash. It would be used for the capex needed for the future, so new airplanes and engines. And that's it for the growth of the company. It's a growth story. So this airline is not a story where you say next year we pay dividend. This is a share which comes to the stock exchange, doubles in size in 5 years. And that is what investors believed. They were not believing in, okay, I buy airBaltic shares and then I get every year my 5% dividend. They were believing they believe in a story where you double in size. And the money would be used for the business, not to pay for losses. It would not be used to repay the bond, because the bond would be refinanced under better terms when it's due, and there's a call option next year in May. And that was the plan, to have, with a stronger balance sheet, refinance the bond, and that is the first chunk where the costs just go down because you have a better interest rate. We did the bond in May last year when you had the highest possible interest rate. Now the European Central Bank has several times decreased, so the bond automatically will be coming at a better interest, but on top of it, with equity on the balance sheet, you have an even better bond. So that is done. And the Pratt & Whitney engine issue is fading away, which means all the issues from that, which was significant, hundreds of millions over the years, will be fading away into positive, because each aircraft delivers EBITDA. And if you have an aircraft and it delivers 5 million EBITDA roughly, and you're adding aircraft to it, the question is, can you do this without increasing your cost at the same time? And that's what airlines do. Yeah, we didn't have the chance to show that because we went from COVID to war to Pratt & Whitney engines in one go, and the war is still impacting us. Just imagine the war wouldn't be there, airBaltic would just open. And it's very sad that we had such a journey, but still we're increasing revenues, passenger numbers, and growing the airline, but on the cost of equity.
That's true. So maybe you mentioned also the currency issue. So was it possible to hedge it?
Yes, it's possible always to hedge, but it comes at a dollar hedging comes at an enormous price. And if it goes in the wrong direction, you can be, with our capital structure, wiped out. So therefore, the decision was not to hedge, or you would not even find a counterparty with that balance sheet to hedge. Right now, it was good that it wasn't hedged, because currently there's a benefit of 10 cents to this year.
Yeah,
last year. But again, the impact of the dollar in the loss last year was irrelevant. It's just, I try to explain again. We have $500 million in dollar liabilities on the balance sheet. That is the leases of the aircraft. At the beginning of the year, the dollar exchange rate, because you can't put dollars into the balance sheet, you need to calculate with the exchange rate, 103, the $500 million, and then you have your euro value. At the year end, you have to do the same exercise, because nothing changed, but you have to re-evaluate the dollar liabilities, which is $500 million. And now that the dollar jumped actually by 10 cents in the wrong direction, you now need to book that difference as a loss. But you didn't lose anything. It's accounting, and unfortunately, last year
it has nothing to do with money on account.
No, nothing. It's cash. But you have to do it this way, and all airlines have to do that, and it's always shown. Right now, since the beginning of the year until today, It just reversed, even more than reversed.
So
right?
what's the financial result first quarter?
I'm not allowed to say because
approximately your guess. No, but
No,
now you are not with the company. So.
Yeah, but I'm still a professional. And
Okay.
The result of the first quarter is traditionally the worst quarter of any airline and will not be changed. But if we look at the dollar exchange rate valuation, then of course is I don't know what it was, 10 cents. If it's 10 cents, and it's a 50 million profit. But again, it's not relevant for the business. It's just a valuation, and I think the results will be presented in May. But the first quarter is traditionally a bad quarter for any airline. So therefore,
why? Because people are not flying.
It's the winter quarter, so less flying, and but that's normal. That's priced in. airBaltic, like all air carriers in Europe, make their money in the summer quarters, and they make so much that they offset the winter quarters.
Interesting. People fly more in the summer.
Much more. That's why if you say you take airBaltic out because Ryanair can do the job and Wizz Air, they can do the job even better because they bring more capacity, but they bring it more extreme for the summer because that's when people want to fly. In the winter, they are not interested in offering you all this connectivity and they're not flying into all the hubs where you can connect to the world. In the winter, you would then just fly on traditional carriers, if they come at all, to their hubs. But then you would probably see a shift of flying more via Vilnius or Estonia. So because if you don't operate this as a hub, you will not connect Riga the way it was. But let's not go down that road. Let's hope that it all goes well and we maintain Riga as a hub. Because otherwise you don't need to expand the airport. You can save more money. You have the Rail Baltica building there, which is now not used anymore. You can then stop the expansion of the tower, expansion of the airport. What a story that would be, basically a week before you could have done an IPO. Yeah, crazy. But again, I have seen a lot of things in these 14 years, and that is the move which I understand the least, to do this right now. To win a local election for the mayor of Riga, if that was the reason, then that was not very smart.
To not go under 5%.
Yeah, but I don't think that I had that impact on the results. Then I don't know, because people are voting in 2 months, right? So, but I'm not a politician. I don't even speak the language. So, how can you use me for voters? Only for somebody who's very short term thinking. And if there's still 2 months to go, how can you be sure that in 2 months the situation is much better than it is today? Then you need to do a lot of political advertising.
Unfortunately, our politicians think in 2 weeks term or something, maybe 1 week. So, not big fan.
But I would not at the moment say, because I haven't heard the bashing from the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister or the Foreign Minister about me. I have only seen a lawyer who I don't even know who he is, and my State Secretary in my office ordering the supervisory board to terminate my contract. That's all I have seen. And then I guess the minister said something, but I met the new minister 2 times together with Lufthansa in my office and then at a dinner. He was very friendly to me. He had no issues that moment. And also since then, he hasn't said anything, at least to my knowledge, negative. So if we talk about politics, then I would say there is in the Ministry of Transport probably a little group who had a task and they did it and they didn't do it very smart. Because
I think still it was, as I mentioned before, so I think the budget, there's a big gap in the budget. Your current plan is IPO. Then they need to inject more money. People will not understand it, and their popularity will decrease even more. So that's the 1 + 2.
But in politics, you always have to make a compromise.
But of course, there was like, if that's not a good solution, then management is still good. Maybe let's not do the IPO. Let's do the different strategy. But this was maybe too much for them to ask.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I know a lot, as you can guess, also with the people involved, and I haven't heard back anything in this respect. So, and I will probably not, because I'm not part of it anymore. Okay,
but let's maybe brainstorm a bit about strategy. So, if the IPO currently is not the plan, even if it was possible to do, and maybe initially the government would be more, but then slowly you can the list, and then eventually the result would be achieved. But okay, if it's not the result, and they cannot bring somebody in who wants to do the same, because then why would they fire you? Yeah, then they would admit it was a mistake. So they need different strategy. So what could be the strategy for airBaltic?
I only have a strategy where we add 50 aircraft and finally deliver proper net profits by growth. That was a growth strategy. I still think this is the best way forward, as the aircraft are secured and the world.
We have already contract to
yes,
buy them.
It's contracted and they are coming in. They are prepaid and so on. So that is still the strategy. There is of course the idea. So shrinking doesn't work. I think that has been tested, because if you shrink, you have a short-term benefit. You unemploy people, you shrink the airline, but then you disappear. I think we all know in Europe there has not been a single airline shrinking successful. They disappear. You could find a buyer, so you say, okay, there is somebody who wants to buy it. If it's a large airline group, they will have to go to the EU and ask for permission to do so. That's a process which takes a year, 2, so until it's done. So you would have to bridge it also. But then the strategy of that airline, why would they want to have Riga as a hub? What would be their benefit of it? To separate the two businesses, I read that somebody said that we should separate the two businesses, the wet lease business. Yes, then we can be a Avia Solutions airline on one side, make money.
Something like Starlink, yeah,
yes.
They are renting out the planes.
Yeah, then you are renting out planes. But what do you do with the other part? Because airBaltic had 50% EBITDA margin on the wet lease business and 20% on the scheduled business. So when you're losing the 50%, you're not supporting anymore the airline, which means you make the situation even worse. The model is seen from the financial world as a genius model to have both fully integrated. It's the only airline in the world doing it. But yes, you can split the successful part away, but then the successful part cannot anymore support the other part, because that's what we were doing today.
Okay. Can you please mention what was the margin for scheduled planes and what is the margin for renting the planes?
I think last year the scheduled planes, the annual report was 20%. No, overall it was 25% EBITDA margin. That's in the annual report. But the scheduled is above 50%. And in the peak season above 60%, and the others were going down to 16%. But the revenue from the wet lease part is smaller, but the EBITDA margin is higher, because there you're only renting out the plane and the crew, and you're getting paid fixed on a fixed profit base, while on the scheduled business you have the full-blown cost of an airline with administration, ticket sales and so on. But these two, airBaltic has positioned itself as a premium carrier in this segment, next to other players, mainly Avia Solution Group, with SmartLynx and others. And that has been very successful. The Lufthansa contract for the next 3 years is signed, and airBaltic is providing up to 21 aircraft to Lufthansa Group in this contract, which is very profitable. That could be a solution, that you say, okay, we stop airBaltic, we don't want that airline anymore, we keep only that. But that would be completely against any logic of developing Latvia. That would be the worst decision you could take, because you can write it down that you start the end of the economic development by connectivity by air.
Okay, so can you please tell me how many airplanes we have now and how many of those are going in directions from Latvia and how many of those we are renting out?
So today it's 50 aircraft are in airBaltic's fleet. Up to this summer, 17 aircraft are flying for Lufthansa Group, and the rest is for airBaltic, but then there's also planes which we can't use because of missing engines, so therefore 3 corporate airplanes are coming in to help overall. But airBaltic's operation is 50 aircraft, and about 1/3 is supposed to fly for others, and when we have 100 aircraft, the business plan says we want to fly with 35 aircraft in this business.
Okay, well, 1/3 we are renting out and 2/3 are flying
yes.
For our destinations and our kind of interests. And then from revenue point of view,
to 80% of the revenue is made with the scheduled business today,
okay.
And 20%, but that is increasing, is made by the wet lease business.
Okay, and then the 50 that would come?
They would be going in the same split to scheduled business and to wet lease
but
business.
Is there space to add another 30 planes to the scheduled business?
Yes, we're lacking airplanes today. That's why we bring Carpet Air in, and we need to put more planes to Vilnius and Tallinn, because there is a market which we are not having the same market share than we have here.
Okay.
But you add planes at other airports, and then there's the Nordic bases where there's a plan on how to deploy the aircraft in the future. And the biggest issue airBaltic has is not having enough planes because of the engine issues. It's not that if we would not take Carpet Air in, if we would not need to take other planes in, but we don't have enough of our own.
Okay, and then the basically the revenue. What would be the result if we have another 50 planes? Just double the revenue?
More than double the revenue, because you get higher utilization. If an airline grows on the fleet size, especially with a simplified fleet, you're reaching a better scale effects, which means you don't need in the admin add so much. You can have the same revenue management system and sell more tickets.
The costs would be less, but the revenue would be pretty much the same, no?
No, revenue goes also slightly up, because with the increase in fleet, your utilization, as you're not flying so much out of the hub anymore, percentage-wise, the aircraft utilization goes up, and with that you have a higher margin per aircraft. So I would say around 2 billion would be a good number in 2030 to look at if you have 100 planes by that time. And then EBITDA would also go significant up to today's EBITDA, right? So I can't tell the number.
Okay, but then what we are missing too, because the contract for another 50 planes is there, so what is the missing part to achieve that?
At the moment, only to finance them, so to be able to prepay them and pay for the cost of one aircraft would cost you, if you bring 300 million equity in, you would say, okay, 6 million per airplane you need to invest so that you can do it.
What's the price of one airplane?
I can't disclose the list price, is approximately 100 million, but that is not what airBaltic pays.
Okay, 100 million, then just a bit maybe less.
So if you today you can Google it, that or AI tells you that a good lease rate would be $250,000 plus per month, because it's sale and lease back, and then you have a 12-year lease, and that's your cost per airplane.
But then still there is a skin in the game. It's like whatever, 5-6 million per plane.
No, this would be if you do a very simple calculation. You take 300 million, you divide it by 50 planes, you have 6 million, and you say, where does the money go? But it's not that way. Yeah? You're not putting 6 million for a plane. You are buying the plane, you prepay 15% of the plane is prepaid over 2 years. Then you sell the plane to a leasing company and you lease it back for 12 years. And then you have a monthly lease rate to pay, which is your cost. That's the debt of the company. And there airBaltic has, because we closed the contract in 2012 and then added a very favorable rate. So this contract has a value, because if you add these aircraft, then you get them cheaper than competitors. And we're the largest operator of that type.
And you also got them while everyone else is in a line standing. So.
Yeah. So there's a couple of advantages which we also pitch to investors to say this is an airline which has an asset which everybody wants. Minority shareholder sees this also as the biggest asset, because he is from that industry. Even Lufthansa sees this as an asset because they see that airBaltic has a lot of planes coming. So there's a lot of people outside who see all the benefits. Otherwise, we wouldn't have talked with global banks about an IPO. And it's sad that we don't have that discussion here. We have a local discussion about my salary or driving an Audi e-tron. And this discussion never happened here. The media did not pick it up, nor was that discussion done in politics in a proper way. There was Kaspars Briškens. He understood the business very well, but then he had other issues with my previous supervisory board last year, which was also a very difficult move, that the so far best supervisory board for preparing an IPO was taken out overnight.
It's all political.
Yeah. And that's why I say I was the stable factor for 14 years. I could bring that stability which is needed to go for that final step, so that the nation finally comes to peace with airBaltic as it is a privatized airline. It is the first company which the country would privatize. It comes with a lot of pain. I was ready to take it with all that hate and everything which came to me, because after the privatization, everybody is happy. State, because they have the airline, but also investors, because they have a growth story. I took the pain, but I couldn't do anything against a move on last week, Monday. I didn't know at 12 o'clock what would happen. It was very bizarre how it happened. So it looked like this was not long-term planned. This was just an ad hoc move, as you do it in politics.
They are kind of desperate, yeah. That's why.
That's why I say if you have, if you look at it, you can say, so how can we make the best out of it? And then you have all your options on the table. And then people should say, actually, as stupid as it sounds, but that is a better option than that option. And probably they do this now, not publicly, but maybe they are sitting there and saying, so what are our options now? Because there's advisors who tell them.
Then question, so to double the revenue and be profitable and be big hub, so another 300 million are needed. So what was the plan to use some money from the IPO to buy the new planes?
The equity and first of all, the airline needs to go with a stronger cash position. As an airline, you should have 10% of your revenues in cash at all times. We were always in the winter time low on cash, and that means credit card companies, creditors in general want to have higher deposits. You're taking liquidity out of the system, which is not needed. So first thing is stabilize the cash of the company, and then have investments. There's a hangar coming to be built, the largest hangar in the Baltic states, to be able to maintain these aircraft. That's a capex. Then you have future aircraft coming in. That's a capex. You have spare engines. So it's investment into the company, and therefore you need equity. Normally the shareholders would bring the equity and say, okay, and then later we have a bigger business. But the Latvian states, two reasons why they didn't do it alone. The EU would not let them do it alone. They can only do 2/3, and then a private party has to join, but that is still an option. Or you do an IPO where you would not bring more than 2/3, and then private shareholders come in. And the idea was to strengthen the local stock market, which you would, because you would have had the local public. The calculations from the local banks about how much retail demand would be created with the marketing we had for the IPO, it would have been the largest IPO in the Baltic states by far, because the public would have become shareholder of the company.
And become even more loyal.
Yes.
Your loyal customers to Baltic. So
yes.
Kind of win-win.
So I think this program was, or is, very smart. I don't know whether they continue doing it, but the local banks who were supporting it, and even the international banks, liked the idea a lot, which means you have two things. You strengthen the local capital market, you strengthen the loyalty of the taxpayer because they become investors, and they can become investors, and you have a growth story. What you don't have is a story where people invest and then they get dividend. That would come at a later stage.
Okay, so please then let's keep discussion about the strategy. So, okay, the new CEO comes, state says we don't have money, so what happens? Then probably the easiest, I think, solution is, okay, let's keep whatever, I don't know how many planes we need to keep on the schedule and how many we should rent out, but then I think that's the easiest kind of for a new CEO, right? He will say, okay, we can have 10 destinations and 40 planes we will rent out and the business will be profitable. There will be no hub or whatever, but I will not need any new money, right?
I would say that the new CEO comes in and the state does what they didn't do now, because by the time the new CEO has evaluated the situation, he has, first of all, there's Pauls and Witolds, two very qualified board members running the show today. The CFO, it's not, I didn't take any decisions, right? There's a board in airBaltic and a supervisory board, and that plan which we execute was developed in the company. It wasn't Gauss' plan. But the two board members are still there, and I think a new CEO would talk to them and say, so what are our options? And they would say the best option going forward would be doing exactly what we wanted to do in the first week of April. So, but then you let's say you find the best CEO ever, then it's up to him, because he will also have to work with the board, the executive board, because the decisions in airBaltic are taken only at the board level. It's not taken by an individual. It's not a company which has a private owner. It is not the time which we had in Flick, where the CEO took decisions on his own. In airBaltic, I have not taken a single decision without executive board members signing up for it, and all of them are protocoled for 14 years. So if you say airBaltic did something bad, or the CEO, then airBaltic's executive board failed, because I haven't taken a single decision. I represent the company to the outside, but my role was a board member only allowed to take decisions together with others. The new CEO probably will not get the right to take decisions on his own, so he will also work with the two very qualified board members. So therefore, when you look at it, he will have to come to a decision to do something which is the same than the current board would do.
Okay, but my bet is like 99% that there will be no new money. They will say, whatever, you should live with what you have and don't please ask for new money ever.
Then you do an IPO without the money from the state. You just wait for better time of the markets, because the story itself is good. If the state says, we don't bring any money, you bring others who believe in the story. And that was the role we had, but not in the role when Trump does one crazy announcement after another. But airBaltic's story is internationally liked. I can only say people should listen to what international people say, but not this week, because this week in the markets was very negative.
It's true. Okay, but then can we please elaborate a bit on this strategy? So if we want airBaltic to be profitable, how many planes we can keep for ourselves and how many we need to rent it out?
The plan was to do long-term profitability with 1/3 of the planes flying for others and 2/3 flying for airBaltic.
It's enough even with the 50 planes?
Today that works, yeah. So the last year or the year before we were making a profit. This year it was a loss, but more outside. So you should in a normal year make even with the 50 planes profit, but you can't keep it because you need to grow. An airline which stops growing in revenues and EBITDA will eventually turn into losses because the costs are going up and your revenue is not going up. So therefore this split was okay now and will be okay in the future. But the beauty is that you could at any time change that strategy and say, I put more into scheduled flying or more into wet lease flying, because each plane you take a decision basically 6 months before what you do with it. Do I put it into this kind of the business or in this business? And this model worked now very well for airBaltic, because with this flexibility, you have 2 business models in one airline.
Okay, so but then maybe you can comment I think that's the most likely scenario, that if you can make it with renting 1/3 and keeping 2/3, it's what's going to happen. But then what you mentioned, if you are not growing, you are basically kind of ending the story in some sense. Maybe if they go this strategy, what will happen in 5-10 years? If they're not buying new planes, you just live with whatever you have.
No, I guess that the market will take the market. So as the market is growing, the aviation market is growing. So if you are not growing, then competitors take the market share. That's already happening now this year or last year. So when you are not growing in a market, somebody else takes the market, because we're out of COVID. So either you grow or somebody else grows. And if you outgrow somebody, we did it in Estonia. We outgrew Ryanair, right? But that doesn't mean that Ryanair is not coming back. Ryanair or Wizz Air can at any time come back if they see a market for them. If you're not competing against them because you don't have the capacity, then competition comes into the market, which would speak for all the public who says we want to fly Ryanair. The problem is it's not the solution, because wherever airlines have, and I'm talking about smaller countries or smaller places, where they relied only on that, the connectivity long-term wasn't as good. While Ryanair is a beautiful company, perfectly run, everything is perfect in Ryanair, cheap prices, profitable, but they are not providing what Latvia needs. No rail, no road, no shipping lines. We are not talking about the center of Europe, but people don't realize, because airBaltic has been here for 30 years. And that's, I think, something people don't understand. Just go to Ljubljana and see what happened there. Adria Airways disappeared. That's it. No connectivity. Yes, they have a little bit of Ryanair, they have a little bit of Lufthansa, but that's it. It's a nation with 1.8 million people and an airline which last year carried 8.3 million passengers. What do you expect what would happen if you say you scale down? The connectivity will disappear, but the state might not have to put any money. The passengers fly on cheaper tickets, so everybody seems to be happy. But there's also an economic impact of having this airline doing what it does. And if it's done profitable, as it was for many years while I was running it. So nobody was complaining in the years when I made small profits, right? They were only complaining in COVID time and in the war time that I didn't make profits. Nobody complained when we made profits in 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Everybody was fine. So now if you stop the growth of airBaltic, you open the markets for competition. That's it. And then I
agree. No, maybe other strategy could also be that all kinds and all ways of transportation in Latvia are kind of have some support, like money-wise, yeah? And then maybe if we just agree on that airBaltic needs whatever 20, 30, 50, 10, I don't know, some amount of money that is supported because we want the connectivity to be there, it also will be strategy.
Yeah, but it's not allowed by EU. So that would be easy if you like the econ minister told me when I was once in his office, the one who wanted me to be fired in January already. He said, Mr. Gauss, we have minibuses running for the next 3 years to the countryside. That cost us as much as you have burned in 30 years. So there is a lot of this happening, but in the aviation sector you cannot do it because the EU says a state cannot single-sided subsidize its airline. So therefore that solution doesn't work. You can do a lot as a state. There's PSO flying or risk-sharing models like we do with Lithuanians. They are now looking at this as well here. But you cannot support the airline alone. You need to always have a pari passu, which means a private shareholder goes together with you. Then you can subsidize it. But airlines in Europe are not allowed to be subsidized. Not like local transport, which you can subsidize because you want it for your infrastructure.
Okay. And the minister you just mentioned also, kind of, his voters going with the bus to the countryside. So he was also not supportive of
No,
you.
he was not supportive. I never had the chance that he explains it to me why he was in January starting that I should be dismissed. He started the whole debate about it, and yeah, he eventually
it's
was right.
for his voters, so it's all political.
Yes, and then again, me being a German and I consider myself a senior manager of in aviation with more than 30 years of experience. I need to stand above it, that noise, and I did. Yeah, but of course, I mean, at the end of the day, the shareholders decide, and my shareholder was the Ministry of Transport, where a state secretary took a decision. It wasn't the minister, it wasn't the cabinet, it was a state secretary who read that to me. And the supervisory board had, because there was a voting in the supervisory board with the private shareholder voting against it, but the two representatives of the state, they had to execute the order of recalling the chairman of the executive board. So the process was done in a way that you withdraw the confidence, and then the supervisory board, and I'm not sure whether they wanted it or not, had to do it. And then they did it. Yeah, but they didn't even do it. I mean, I have a contract. They didn't do anything to the contract. I think they say by doing this, they terminated the contract. I think that's what the...
Okay, that was just that execution. But okay, maybe let's go back to a bit as a manager. So you have experience 14 years in leading the team of 3,000 people. So it's a huge number. So maybe you can elaborate on your management kind of way. Are you the control freak, or you trust the team and give them? So maybe you can elaborate on that, and also about like Latvians as such. So 3,000 people working for you. What can you tell about them? What's kind of?
I had basically from the very beginning a weekly briefing to my staff where they live streamed, and even their families were sitting, and we had more than 1,000 people joining on these live streams. And every week I presented all details about the company, numbers, where we're going. And at the end of that, there was always the chance to do Slido, anonymous for anybody, also the unions, and I never prohibited any questions anonymous, and I answered live every week, every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And you can ask any airBaltic employee what they think about this. It was unique. That's how I run the company, completely open. I run it with corporate governance, so any meeting since I'm in the company, because I came in a difficult time after Flick and drama, I brought in a corporate governance. First I did forensic audit, brought KPMG, did a corporate governance to international standards, and there's I was raised by British Airways, so I had like structures, so I brought in all the structures. And every audit this company has done looks at the corporate governance and then ticks the box. The management team of airBaltic is 11 people who have been with me in this team for 10 years. They are the ones running the company, not me. I'm the face. And the two board members, Pauls and Vitols, are technically the board, but I didn't run executive board meetings. I ran the top management meeting / board meeting, and we were voting all 11, on all decisions. There was no decisions the board members took against the management of the company. And then we had regular supervisory board meetings where we presented to them in the same structure. And that's how I run the company and will always run companies. Very structured, because airlines, I have run airlines. Airlines are run like this. And therefore I can just go into another company and would plug in the same. I would be super transparent to the staff. You need to, because a lot of them are remote because of crew. And very important, you tell them every step what you do. And depending on what you can say and not, but I was very open to our staff. That's why everybody could tell you what the business looks like. They can tell you the dollar exchange rate. They can tell you how many planes we have. That's how I run. My leadership style is open, and I trust the people to execute. I'm not a hire fire guy. I'm not a control freak, but I'm a very strong leader, because I definitely give the direction of where we could go, and then I try to execute it with the team. But if they said this is stupid, then of course I had no veto right. So if the majority in the room would say, no, Martin, we don't think that is good, then there wouldn't be even a discussion. I run companies with consent, and it worked very well. So you probably will not find anybody giving an interview and saying, finally, that guy is gone. So therefore, I think that speaks for me. And again, not advertising, but that LinkedIn post I did has 300 comments on it now. And each of them, without an exception, talks about my leadership style. So therefore, that's the world talking about it, not locally. And so therefore, I would say I'm okay with my leadership style. And I have not done this the first time here. I'm 34 years now in this business.
Okay, so please give me 3 your best decisions and 3 your worst decisions.
The best decision was to stick with the aircraft selection in 2012, where Mr. Dombrovskis supported me against the French and the Germans interfering that we would buy a Canadian aircraft, the A220, which today is an Airbus. That was for sure one of the strategic best decisions. The next good decision was, and this was again done together with the board, the next one was to go for a single fleet, not anymore have all these turboprops and long haul and short haul. And the third decision is my openness. It's not a decision, but it is something I never let slip, to brief the employees the way I did. These are the 3 things I would say. The negative decisions, there are thousands, because as a manager, you basically all the time think, why did we do this?
We have time.
No, but of course, in January, there was a cancellation of flights, which caused a lot of drama. That should have been done differently. I think that was not a smart one recently. And then, maybe not to say stop when certain political pressures were there, to say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore, and be stronger. But I always try to find consent between the different parties or players. So that is now seen as not so smart. What would be my third? I mean, if you do a mistake as a manager, that is why you are experienced, right? If there's a manager who says is perfect, but lots of little things where you then say, okay, we once decided as a team to remove the front wardrobe from airBaltic, and it took us 2 years to recover, because when you redo this building of an aircraft, you need a very long time to redo it. We did it again. That was definitely a wrong decision taken by us, and therefore I'm responsible for it as well. But many. I mean, we can spend another podcast just on, if you give me time, to go and say all the things I did wrong. I do believe that I'm an entrepreneur kind of leader, and I believe in doing mistakes which are controllable, which you can fix again.
Okay.
So
what was the cost of launching Starlink on airBaltic?
I'm not allowed to disclose the cost, but it is already paying off because of the feedback once somebody sits on a Starlink flight. So therefore, that was not a big decision to take, but it was a good one for the future, leading in the world. It came at the wrongest time because Elon Musk turned crazy on basically the day when we launched. We couldn't leverage on him anymore.
Yeah.
But there was supposed to be a phone call with me and him on that flight, but we did not do it because it would have not been a good one. Starlink itself is a technology which is very good, and airBaltic as the first in Europe. In 5 years, you will probably have a lot of airlines having that as a standard. Now airBaltic has it very soon.
But the contract is on all planes?
All planes.
When all planes will have the internet?
By the end of the year.
By the end of the year.
And
already?
I understand since I have left the company, the 5 planes which have it have reduced to 1 being having it. I don't know the technical reason, what's the reason for it, but there was a temporary issue, I think, airBaltic side, where they're looking into, because I had it on a flight. And I didn't have it now on a flight when I was again on it, but I didn't know. They're not telling me now what happened with my. So it wasn't my dismissal wasn't meaning that SpaceX switched off Starlink, but by end of this month is supposed to be 12 planes having it, and in the summer half of the fleet. So the chance goes up each time you fly that you have it. It's a very, very nice idea behind it. What offsets the cost for Starlink against what it gives, what it brings.
That's definitely. Okay. So when you go, whatever, Germany or whatever the country, you are international CEO, and if somebody asks you, so please tell me about Latvia, so how is it, what's the people, what's happening there? So what are you usually telling?
Beautiful. I always invite people to come because of the nature, especially when you drive outside Riga city. And I have seen the country, I don't know how often I've been in Kapkolka and in Kuldiga and all these places. Nature. So nature is like Canada. I describe it 512 kilometers, sandy beach, no houses, and a lot of forest, and the highest clean water reservoirs per capita. I say that the city is in summer very lively, Riga city, in winter a bit boring. And I say that the Baltics are still suffering from the influence from the past. So that's how I describe it. And I describe it as my home because it is, or it was. Because I have in Bredaine a very nice piece of land with a project house approved to be built there, which was my intention to live there, not only in the city center. Yeah, that might now change, but this is my home because I have 4 places where I live, but this is the one where I spend most of the time. And I did not have a social life like other people have because I consider airBaltic my social life. I was maybe too deep into airBaltic, but my routine was all around airBaltic, and all the people I know have somehow to do with airBaltic, and not I didn't go and socialize on any of the events. Maybe a mistake now because it's very lonely this week, but I'm always all in if I do something. But I love the country. I mean, I didn't learn the language. Where people say, is he too stupid to learn it? No, I tried even twice. But if you run an international airline internationally, you have not a lot of Latvian talking. And the local events where I should have spoken Latvian, I tried that for a while. That was not very professional. There, people would think I'm handicapped when I speak. But there is a path to learn that language. When you bring the same discipline I bring as a leader in the company, you can also learn the language. There's examples for people who speak it very well. So I think that is something you can do. Otherwise, I was the highest taxpayer for many, many years in Latvia because I had the highest public salary. With that, I had a lot of PR, not so positive. But then I took it. And I like the place where I live. I live in Silence Center, have an apartment there. I like that. I like my routine, having the breakfast in the local coffee shop. And I like the city when it wakes up. I like the airport. I like the ambition to double in size also the airport. So nothing I don't like. That's why I'm here. I had to leave last week because the way how it was done was not smart, nice. Mm-hmm. But then I decided, no, this is where I'm home and I'm coming back.
Okay. So, but most likely your job is related to where you live, right? So it's kind of if maybe you will come back and hopefully come back and fix the company and everything works out, but if not, then basically you will.
Then you need, as everybody who is, anybody who, I have a company, my wealth management company from the past, which of course I'm an owner and I can sort out for months what I want to do there, but this would not satisfy me long term. So I'm a person who wants to, with a vision, build something. I have not at all had the mental capacity to think about what I do next. Not at all.
Okay, I have one idea for
Okay.
you. Maybe we can discuss it. Maybe we'll discuss it. So, what do you think about management buyout? So, have you thought about it
Yes,
ever?
I would love to. I would love to. I would love to. I wanted to do this for all these years. And of course, I have a huge network in the world. But the Latvian state is the shareholder. And they decide, and they just said, okay, we kill the guy. So yes, that is how you do it. Because what you want to have people running a business where they are shareholders. I asked when I signed my first contract, because I was a shareholder in the previous company. I had to buy shares to become the CEO. We did a great turnaround. We sold a profitable company 2 times, and I exited with a very nice amount. That's in all the history books at more than 20 years. So the same I wanted to do here, and they said the state doesn't allow you to be a shareholder. So the contract I have now was deliberately done with a paragraph in there that, because the last contract which I'm in now is one which is dedicated to do the IPO, and it has a clause there which says that this will be done. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Transport stopped. So there was consultants preparing for that, and international consultants to have a proper remuneration policy. But then in the Ministry of Transport, they didn't like it because they would not like to have us being shareholders before the IPO.
But what do you think if we well, I like that I say already we if we or you, yeah, we group of 3 if you go back to them and say, okay, I have a plan how to do IPO without 150 of state, you guys can stay, I have a group of friends that gonna back up the IPO, I have intention letters, and basically this is maybe the way how to do it.
Yes, that is something, but I would say that the state would not accept it, because then the people would say, but why do these guys now in a year's time, why do they make the profits? We could have done it, right? It's always the same. So they enjoyed this airline for 30 years, not putting too much money. 18.1 million is the investment per year in airBaltic. Over 30 years, 543 million. Including COVID money. Without COVID, it's 6 million per year was what taxpayers invested. 6. So now you invest, you and me invest, and then it becomes profitable.
Those 6 million you paid also with the taxes paying to the employees.
No, it was all paid back in the form of, so we paid 400, so the state put 543 million in 30 years, not more. 543 million into the equity of the company. Taxes paid, Gewaltkasse, was 450 million. Just that alone would mean the net to the company was like very, very small. But I'm saying, and in the COVID time, this money was also put, so that's included in the 500. But there's 2 numbers, 18.1 million per year if you take all money. If you take COVID money out, then it's 6 million per year. Which is still a lot of money, but it is by far not what you're putting into local trams. But if we come back to say, okay, how does it look that the management comes? It's very simple. You and me go to private equity firms, and there's many out there who like the idea. They agree that we will be running the show. That's how you do a management buyout. And then you go to your shareholder and you say, we'd like to do that.
And the state can keep those 25%.
Yes, but then the discussion would immediately start. How can it be that we invested in 30 years 500 million, and now these guys come in and get it? This debate is something which...
But this would be the same in the IPO scenario that was approved.
No, the IPO was, we didn't do the ITF, so the final, actually the supervisory board approved that the board issues the prospectus. So that was even approved, but the prospectus wasn't finalized because certain elements from the state were still missing. And exactly that decision. And yes, a management buyout would be something I would love, because that was always my dream, to be again the shareholder of a company, because I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I understand. So I'm just thinking,
unfortunately, I don't have the potentially 300 million to put in, because I would invest if I would have the money, I would. You know why? Because I know that company for 14 years. I closed the contract for 100 planes with Airbus. I was the one doing SpaceX, and I brought Lufthansa. It was me. So therefore, I do understand what I do. The problem is I don't have 300 million.
Is there a strategic investor that would back you?
I could not, in my role, have any of these discussions, unfortunately. Because in my role as a CFO, I would be conflicted because there's bondholders who have rights, but I could not go to somebody and ask. So if you have 300 million, then
300 maybe no, but some part. Okay, let's see how it goes. Okay, I think it was a really interesting discussion. Thank you for finding a time, and let's see how it all develops. So maybe when we stop the recording, maybe we'll think of some management buyout, how to structure it.
Yeah, of course, there's lots of things which go to my head now, what can be done. But I think the first step has to be that I say, guys, this was not smart. Can we please maybe think about it and just like say, okay, this will also be a scandal, but that's a better scandal because you will not lose your 5% in the election, right? You will not lose that because you will lose it because of other stuff. It's 2 months to go. And I would say you lose your 5% rather over something coming now.
Don't you also would be more responsible to kind of meet this Ministry of Economics, meet the Prime Minister, meet the Transport Minister, sit down, have the strategy, understand, yes, no, we can go this way or that way, not just like, oh, you're fired. No, it's just also not showing respect. So I think it's not how things should be done.
No, the politicians, of course, come and go. They get elected, right? They are not like us entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
You will not have any consequences as a politician if you don't perform, because you're just out of the job. They live different. Entrepreneurs live a different life. If you unwire me, then I will be,
then we can start talking.
Then we'll be talking.